butcher's all right. Don't get near their pots, though.
Ogre butchers are second only to tyrants in terms of power and influence, for they are not only the spiritual and magical representative of their tribe and god, but they are also the tribe's foremost cooks, which has an extra station in ogre society. Through the gory ritual preparation and consumption of meat, butchers channel a portion of their fearsome deity's eternal hunger into feats of magic. Invoking the single-minded strength of their god, butchers can instill unnatural vitality to their comrades, swelling the ogre's muscles and toughening their skin. They can even turn their wrath upon the enemy, causing bones to break or the ground to open up and swallow their foes. Although not as mighty as a tyrant, a butcher is an emissary of the Great Maw, and is held in both awe and fear by his tribe. Butchers prepare all of a tribe's feasts, celebrations in which all ogres take great pride. Around a camp, a butcher is given a wide berth, for it is best not to get too close in case he is looking for extra ingredients, as fingers or whole limbs have been known to go missing. In battle, however, butchers are most often found right in the thick of the fighting, where they use their cleavers and magic to great effect. Butchers are typically more rotund than the average ogre, and have even worse personal hygiene. They often resemble walking larders, for in addition to being caked in dried blood and offal, butchers adorn themselves with chunks of meat, along with an array of meat hooks, cleavers, filleting knives, and even special tenderizers tucked into a leather apron, or even pierced through their flabby skin. A butcher must be prepared to use these items in all their gore-soaked rituals at a moment's notice. Of all true ogres, only butchers do not wear a gut plate. They trust their guts to the protection of the Great Maw. Any infant that conforms to the recognized portents is immediately handed to the tribe's butcher, who bites deep into the whelp's gut to claim it as his own. The butcher then force-feeds the child in a continual glut until the protege has grown fat and strong. Further intonations to the secrets of the Great Maw include gulping down rotten meat and toxins to build a tolerance to poison, learning the art of grinding bones to mill, and discovering which parts of a beast to devour to augment different magics. Butchers are responsible for blessing their tribal warriors with the power of the Great Maw itself, as well as inflicting great harm to those who dare to stand before them. Some butchers show an inclination towards magics other than the Great Maw. Some take powers from the very animals they cull, while those who dream of an oncoming fiery comet have a penchant for reading the future and controlling the weather in destructive ways, whilst always looking to the heavens for some skyborne disaster. Still other butchers revel in the final act of their killing work, and their spells focus on death and dying. Regardless of their focus, ogres believe that to cross a butcher is to cross the Great Maw itself, a certain recipe for painful doom. Ogre Slaughtermasters are the most senior-ranking butchers within the tribe, immense, corpulent hulks covered in offal of dried blood. They have appalling personal hygiene, and love nothing more than to wallow themselves in meat, guts, and blood, regardless of its source. Hideous and mean, butchers are essentially the ogre equivalent of a tribal shaman, yet their role is more that of a holy man than a magic user. They have a direct link to the Great Maw, and channel a portion of this deity into a practice known as gut magic. During induction into the cult of the Great Maw, these Slaughtermasters are taught how to tame fire. As Firemaster, Shaman, and Head Chef, Slaughtermasters wield a large amount of influence within each ogre kingdom, second only to the tyrant himself. twinned with their malign intellect, it is not uncommon for the hoarse whispers of a tribe's slaughtermaster to dictate the bellowed commands of his tyrant.
It was you, Gilmog. It was you who brought the Emperor's wrath upon us. It was you who first tasted the flesh of the little ones. It was you who led the rest of our warriors to feast upon the soft meat out in the rice fields. You deceived them all. Now you cannot satisfy your hunger, even when you devour the bodies of your own kin. It is too late. We all know it. We can all feel that craven hunger inside us now. You've infected all of the ogre kin with your greed, and created something far greater and more terrifying out there in the wastelands. I know this to be true, because I've seen it for myself.
Groth Onefinger was the first ogre butcher, holding the first feast on the lip of the Great Moor itself, and being the first of his prophets. Groth was born as the son of the greatest chieftain of the ogre tribes, the famed Rothog of the Lazar tribe. Yet as a pup, he was troubled with dark visions of the inevitable downfall of ogre kind at large. According to legend, when Groth's father returned from the far north as a mercenary of Cathay during the War of the Black Lotus, he and his band of mercenaries made their long trek back home, taking supplies of food from the peasants they passed, unconsensually. When they returned to their camp to receive their pay from the Imperial Army of Cathay, they found it devoid of the living, save for Groth, who stood impassive, even as his father and his brethren demanded an answer for his wanton killing. He gave no real answer, save for a warning to his father, before the old chieftain died of a sudden heart attack, mere moments after Groth slowly walked away into the distance. Considered a madman due to his insistence that the coming of the ogre god was near, he was severely wounded in the cataclysm that proved him irrefutably correct. Groth was horribly burned by the resultant firestorm, losing his nose, eyelids, lips, ears, and all bar one of his digits to the searing flames. But Groth rose again like a hideous phoenix, blackened, wide-eyed, and utterly convinced that his god had come to earth. With unholy fervor, Groth tracked down his old tribe, the Lazar, and confronted the new chieftain, a large ogre called Gilmog, who was part of his father's mercenary company. No one knew except Groth that it was Gilmog who brought the horrors of the Great Moor upon their race. When the band tried to extort supplies from the Cathayan peasants, it was Gilmog who was the first of the ogres to taste the tender meat of child flesh. That incident sealed the fate of the ogres, as the fate of the eaten children came to the ears of the celestial emperor. Gilmog, seeing the truth of his words, was helplessly frightened at the revelation, even as his former tribe began to encircle him and eat him whole. Instilled with faith, Groth led the survivors of his tribe across the vitrified sands towards the impact crater. They battled thirst, hunger, and despair, keeping their spirits high by eating the weaker members of the tribe on the way, until they set eyes on the Great Moor. Momentarily sated, after devouring several thousand of his kin, it let Groth and his kin live. Groth became the first butcher of the ogres, slaughtering several of his kin and holding a cannibalistic feast right on the lip of the moor itself. His name is still praised by butchers across the ogre kingdoms, many of who still ritually burn themselves in honor of the first great prophet. His descendants, the Lazars, still live on the outskirts of the desolate wastes that used to be the ogre homelands, and are twisted and malformed creatures, permanently wrapped in filthy sackcloth, with chains and piercings studding into their flesh. They regard the Great Moor as their tyrant, and the sound of their bells haunts the passes that lead to the moor itself, that many ogres journey through on a pilgrimage to meet the Great Moor.
Your blood tastes so sweet, like sugar cane.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!